Back. So we're moving out of the ancient world and into sort of the medieval era, right? So we ended with the Roman Empire, the fall of the Western Roman Empire around 400 AD, and the Byzantine Empire lasts for another 1,000 years, right? And over that time, many of the other empires that we'll be talking about flourish as well, right? Islamic empires, the Mongols. So this is the Byzantine Empire is a nice bridge between the Roman world and the world we'll be in sort of the next unit of the course. So again, so towards the end of the lecture on ancient Rome, we saw Constantine's conversion to Christianity, and then the subsequent Christianity becoming the official religion of Rome, right? And we saw that this sort of contradicts one of the important uh, strategies, right, of the Roman Empire, one of the important repertoires, which was being very open and inclusive of whatever religion there might be. So I conquer, a neighboring people, but I let them keep their religion. I let them keep many of their governmental uh, bureaucracy, much of the bureaucracy and much of the way of life, even their legal system. Uh, there's not much cost, right, to that group to being incorporated into the Roman Empire, and there might even be some benefits, right? So, how would a monotheistic Roman Empire fare, right? Are they sacrificing a crucial repertoire, right, that helps keep the empire glued together? Or could it be even more beneficial, or could the benefits outweigh the drawbacks, right? The unifying force of a single religion, if you can get everyone on board, could be quite powerful, right? So if the empire converted, stayed Christian, and a majority of their people uh, could be converted to Christianity, then you might actually have something that's even more unifying than the diversity. But of course, monotheism is less flexible, right? Often there is uh, agreements, even wars fought when two incompatible religions butt heads, right? So monotheism is incompatible with every other religion. So there's also the possibility for a crack, right? If a significant part of the empire decided to go their own way in that respect. And even really within Christianity, we can see serious disputes. Uh, and we see, right, in the modern day, we have, right, the Catholic Church, and then we have uh, the Eastern Orthodox Church, right, which is popular in sort of Russia, Armenia. So these are distinct forms of Christianity. So there was a split ultimately within Christianity. So the Byzantine Empire sort of began when the capital of Rome was moved to Constantinople, previously known as Byzantium. Right, this is in 324 AD CE. So Rome, the Western Roman Empire had not yet fallen, right? Uh, but nonetheless, the empire was moved. Uh, Perhaps they saw the writing on the wall. Uh, so Constantinople is right. You can see right there, right on the edge of Turkey. It's at a crucial point there, right at the where the Mediterranean meets the Black Sea. So it's still, the Mediterranean area being trade in that area being the most important economic engine for the Roman Empire. They have not sacrificed this. They may have even actually enhanced it by uh, gaining closer access to the Black Sea. It's also a much more defensible position because being surrounded on all sides by water almost, um, it's much easier to defend than Rome. So it was a primarily Greek population at the time, right? But Rome did not sort of convert to speaking Greek for their official uh, governmental language. They were perfectly happy to coexist with, because as you recall, right, the Romans had great respect for Greek culture, borrowed many gods, right, Greek forms of military. So it was not a So, but by the 400s, right, the Roman Empire has split into two halves, and we have two emperors. So the Eastern Empire was centered around Constantinople, Western around Rome. Not long after, the Western Empire falls to the Ostrogoths, and now the Eastern Roman Empire is all that remains, right? So the Roman Empire is no longer centered in Rome. The Eastern Empire became known as the Byzantine Empire and developed a more Eastern sort of culture, right? There was definitely more Greek influence and more Persian influence in this area. So the emperor of the Eastern Empire, the Byzantine Empire, Justinian, expanded the boundaries of the Eastern Roman Empire and actually reclaimed Rome, defeated the Ostrogoths, right? So now the empire is back to its right largest expanse, but now it's the Byzantine Roman Empire. He retook parts of Africa, parts of Persia. So we're, at least geographically, we're back to our former glory days where the entire Mediterranean is dominated. Uh, but it was a difficult task to accomplish. The expansion was expensive, right? All that money spent on soldiers, and the economy was weakened. And so it was not without a cost. And Justinian was, a very successful Byzantine emperor, and part of that success was due to his continuation of the sort of laissez-faire, which means to let alone in French, attitude towards the conquered people. So again, at this point, Rome, the Byzantine Empire, is a Christian empire, but you can be more or less tolerant of other peoples, right? So Greeks, Armenians, Persians, Berbers, who are the peoples of the North Africa, they're largely allowed to practice their own customs, their own religions, and so on. And so, in a sense, he reverts to that earlier repertoire that had proved to be for the Western Roman Empire and adopts it for the Eastern. But the tolerance wasn't uniform everywhere. So prior to Justinian, Emperor Theodosius had banned pagan ceremonies, closed pagan temples. We saw a bit of this sort of thing towards the end of the film Agora. And as the official religion of a great empire, the Christian church became rich, right? Sort of in stark contrast to its humble beginnings, right? We saw in the film Agora as well. For early Christians, um, very much not particularly fancy, mostly concerned with helping the poor. Well, now it's the official religion of the Roman Empire. Lots of money is flowing in to the church. Some of it was continued to be given to the poor. There was also a lot of building, right, of ornate churches. So Hagia Sophia is still exists, right, in Istanbul, and you can see it. It's really beautiful. So different attitudes were taken towards the different religions of the empire with various levels of tolerance. Paganism was broadly discouraged. Judaism was tolerated because it was seen as being in the same family as Christianity. Um, Islamic people were tolerated insofar as they were good to trade with. Uh, so there's an overall attitude of tolerance and acceptance. So even though there was broad tolerance of other religions, within Christianity, divergent forms of Christianity were not tolerated nearly as much. So in the early years of Christianity, lots of different interpretations were springing up. There's some particularly difficult notions at the core of Christianity. We've got the divine nature of Christ, who's supposed to be God but also human, which is difficult to untangle. You've also got the Holy Trinity, where God is three but also one. So you can see how this is plenty of material for disagreement, and and so this schism eventually breaks between Rome and Constantinople, and you get Catholicism in the West and Eastern Orthodox in the East, and both of these churches are still going strong, right? The Eastern Orthodox is popular in Russia, Greece, Armenia. But what's sort of special and impressive about the Byzantine Empire is its durability, its longevity. It was able to maintain more or less the same basic Roman institutions for 1,000 years longer than the Western Empire. So they maintained an army of some 650,000 men. They continued to collect taxes from for a very large empire. Trade flowed throughout, from 30 to 50,000 officials, right? You have bureaucrats, government officials. They kept doing the traditional building projects, extending them, maintaining them, right? You'll recall the aqueducts, the roads that Romans built everywhere. Um, so a lot of traditional, right, Roman governance was preserved, but there was also a fair amount of Eastern influence. So Middle Eastern monarchs, Persians, had slightly different ways of doing things, and some of these were adopted by the empires. The use of eunuchs, right? So eunuchs were men that had been castrated, right? And they were popular sort of government officials because the assumption was that they, not being able to reproduce, would not be interested in creating a dynasty of their own, right? And thus were less of a threat. A close advisor that's somehow scheming to take over and have his, right, be future emperor. A eunuch is, the assumption was, less likely to do such a thing. So maybe that's the case. Anyway, an Eastern custom that was adopted by the Byzantines. And this new location on the Straits of Bosphorus, right? We saw that little dot, that little isthmus jutting out into the area where the Black Sea meets the Mediterranean. Um, very great defensive position, right? And Constantinople was able to resist attacks that probably would have toppled Rome. There were moments where Constantinople was under threat, and if they had had sort of any other different sort of geography, they might well have been toppled much earlier. But that strategic position did allow them to, was part of the reason why they lasted long. Also, they had flamethrowers, which is pretty cool. Greek fire. So they had some sort of, right, they had the same military advantages of Rome, and even some new ones. So there were some important changes, right? So again, we're talking about 400 AD up to 1400 AD, where we're starting to get into the Middle Ages, and we can see this transition within the Byzantine Empire. So the economic system, right, of the Middle Ages is feudalism for the most part, where you have large landowners that then have serfs that work the land, sort of pay rent, right, so that it's paid toward the lord or the noble that owns the land. And the beginnings of this were seeded in the Byzantine Empire. So before, soldiers had been paid in cash, right, Roman soldiers, and as a way to sort of save cash, uh, the Byzantine emperors started instead giving their soldiers land grants. They said, okay, instead of giving you money, we're giving you this plot of land, right? You can farm it, and your descendants will farm it, and it will be yours forever on the condition that you continue to serve in the military. So if you've got lots of land to go around, that might be a cheaper way to get soldiers, right? And they're soldiers for generations and generations. And feudalism is a similar form of sort of land-based aristocracy, right? Where your wealth is your land. And it makes these, it does save Rome some money, but the problem is that it makes these soldiers self-sufficient, right? So now they've got the land, they're entitled to it. Of course, they're required to go fight, but they may start to think, if I could keep this land and not have to go fight, that would be even better, right? And if I can sort of just secede from the Roman Empire and say, I don't want to associate with you anymore, then maybe I could get the best of both worlds. Whereas if you're having to fight every day for your paycheck, right, you're less likely to think of it. So there was also a transition from slave labor to tenant farmers, right? The serf, I said peasant serf relationship, that's not right. Lord to serf relationship, right? So that you've got the noble and you've got the farmers. You don't own these farmers, but you're in a sort of economic relationship with them. They don't own the land. They're allowed to live on the land and farm the land in exchange for giving you, right, a percentage of the produce. And this ends up being the dominant form that continues into the Middle Ages as slavery starts to decline. So we see the beginning of it in the always trade was crucial to the existence of the empire, and we start to see some middlemen coming in to this economy from Venice. Right? So the city of Venice is like sort of a little island in Italy. If you've ever been, it's really beautiful, right? It's got the canals running through it. It's sort of a floating city, sinking city, right? So the water continues to rise, and the large areas of the city are often underwater. Um, so the Venetians were renowned traders, right? They would transport and exchange goods and became very rich and very influential, right? Through the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance period, and became a very rich and influential city-state. So the Byzantine emperors, right? Byzantine Empire traded with these Venetians, right, and worked with them. By the time we get to the 1300s, Venice is becoming a powerful rival of and again, we're seeing this transition out of the ancient world into what's recognizable as the Middle Ages. Also brought the Black Plague to the Byzantine Empire, 540. So you may have heard of the Black Plague, where a large percentage of Europe was killed, and over various periods in the 600s to thousands. So this is starting to become an issue here. So we're starting to see again the Middle Ages start to appear. Right? And it's all happening. The Byzantine Empire is this bridge. Now, eventually, right, the Byzantine Empire does fall. A number of factors probably influence many of the same sorts of palace intrigues, assassinations, and so on, competition for the emperor that plagued the Western Empire also happened in Byzantium as well. Wherever there's absolute power of this kind, there's going to be competition for it. The Islamic states, who we'll talk about soon, were starting to grow and starting to eat away at the borders of the empire, right, battling for territory. The empire lost Syria and Egypt to Islamic forces, uh, frequently had to defend the capital itself against attacks. Again, as we said, strategic and easily defended position of Constantinople helped the empire to survive probably longer than it might have otherwise. So, even into the second millennium, right after 1000 AD, the Byzantine Empire is still occasionally going through periods of expansion, right? And eventually, some Turkish states were able to conquer large parts of Anatolia, which nowadays we would call Turkey, and that's where Constantinople is located. Um, Finally, Constantinople was finally sacked by actually other Christians, right, on one of the Crusades. So, um, meanwhile, in Europe, right, we have the kingdoms of the Middle Ages and the Crusades going on, and Latin people actually ruled Constantinople for 60 years, and then finally in 1453, the Ottoman Empire it conquers the Byzantine Empire once and for all. We'll talk about the Ottoman Empire later as well. So finally, 1453, right, the Roman Empire is finally gone. A good, right, depending on where you cite the beginning of it, right, a good 1500 to 2000 years, right, where the where the Romans were a force to be reckoned with. But that age is finally over. We're going to move on next to talk about the Islamic states and the Mongols, empires that are not as well known to a lot of people and interesting in their own ways. Show again, if the point of this class just is to sort of figure out what makes empires tick, right? What makes them successful? What makes them less successful? Interesting to see these different forms of empire. So, Islamic empires are less focused on a geographic center. They're much more bonded by a religious bond, and so it's not so important to them to have a capital that is well defended or anything like that. Operate in a totally different way that's much more fluid. And we'll see the Mongol empires, which conquer an enormous territory, right, largest empire in history, but for a relatively short period due to their military expertise on horseback. So lots of diversity and lots of sort of food for thought when you're thinking about paper topics. again, your paper topic does not have to be as broad as what makes empire successful, right? It should probably be quite a bit more narrow than that. I'll give you some, you know, that give you a sense of the scope we may be shooting for. Uh, but at any rate, we're starting to enter into very different uh, shed light on these questions.